Hare Krishna, Prabhu, ¿me escuchas?
Hare Krishna, sí te escucho, pero no te veo.
Y todavía no pongo la.
Hare Krishna. Entonces, I will start with a little chanting, and then we can enter into so the verse we will discuss, as I was suggested, two things. I combined two things into one, crying out for Krishna on the basis of the verse, in case anyone wants to look it up, 11:2:42. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Gopijana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Yashodanandana Gaja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Gaja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Yadvaita Gadadha Shiva Shadi Gura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnupada, Paramahans Parivaj, Vitari Ashto, Tarashata Shishimad, Abhaya Charanaravinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai Nityalila Pravishnu, Vishnupada, Ashto, Tarashata Shishimad. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Thakur Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vindiki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki, Prem se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shiva Shari Gaura Bhakta Vindiki, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Govinda Shamakunda Radha Kunda, Giri Govardhan ki, Vrindavan Dham ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Gangamayi ki, Chamanamayi ki, Tulsi Devi ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Samavita Bhaktivinoda ki, Shri Jugadam Harinam Sankirtan ki, Brihat Midanga ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glory to the assembled devotees, all glory to the assembled devotees, all glory to the assembled devotees, all glory to Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga. So because we'll be speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for those that can be present today, for attending. And I hope that by Krishna's grace and the grace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Panchatattva, six Goswamis, Parampara, and all the Vaishnavas, that I can say something meaningful. So the subject today is crying out for Krishna's mercy. Now, crying out for Krishna's mercy doesn't mean some dramatic performance. Such things are called sahajya. Sahajya literally means cheap. So, as it says, actions speak louder than words. Otherwise, what we do actually is the root and the root expression of our real feelings. Of course, what we think, thinking, willing, feeling. What we think gradually turns into what we do. But what we actually do, how we perform, otherwise, Srila Prabhupada defined duplicity, kutinati, as a big difference between what I say and what I do. Of course, we can have some weakness, we can have some difficulty, but our general activity should be what I think and what I do are the same. So, crying for Krishna is really, the real meaning of it is, what do I do to show that I want to depend on Krishna? Krishna says, Sarvadhamam parityajamam maikam sharanam vraja ham tvam sarvapapavyo mokshayishami ma shuchaha. Krishna says that crying for me means that you give up everything else. Actually, I just wanted to look up something here from just a real quick. I was going to look it up beforehand, and I just remembered it as I began to speak from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, where Srila Prabhupada describes the teachings of Lord Kapila, I'm sorry, or wait, was it teachings of Chaitanya? I believe it's teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Anyway, I'm not going to take time to look it up now, but Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna actually takes interest, personally takes charge of a devotee's life. Of course, from our point of view, Krishna is always in charge of our lives. But Krishna actually takes charge of our lives when we cry out to Krishna by our thoughts, words, and deeds, just like a child crying out for his mother. Otherwise, complete surrender, complete abandon. There's nothing else. So I want to go over that principle in the neophyte stage, the intermediate stage, and the advanced stage of devotional service with some examples. But first of all, we'll read the verse for today and take it to the verse. Somehow or another, the verse disappeared. Let me just put it in again. Oh, I see. I'm sorry, just I lost the verse. Get back to here. Krishna. When you have a physical book, these things never happen. But just like I was speaking to a lawyer this morning, and then afterwards, very accomplished lawyer in our movement, and afterwards I was thinking how nowadays it's much easier to be a lawyer because previously you had to have a big library of books and you had to read all those books and all those different cases from history, which is called jurisprudence. And then you know the previous cases and then you go look it up again and make your case. But now lawyers have internet and they can just put in the case situation and they can get the judgment. But that doesn't make a competent lawyer. And also devotees can have folio or Srila Prabhupada folio, and you can look up something very quickly, but that doesn't make you a scholar. What makes you a scholar is being able to remember it. And what makes you a devotee is that you live it. So anyway, that's just a little reflection that I had. So we'll read the verse today, which is again 11:242. Bhakti parashanubhavo viraktir anyatra chaishatrika eka kalaha prapadyamanasya yatashnatasyus tushti pushti kshudapayo nughasam. So this is a very famous verse, and Srila Prabhupada quoted it many, many times. Maybe, I don't know how many times. Let me see, I just looked it up, so let me see how many times. 209 times. No, that's quite a few times, which means it's a very important verse. And the reason is, it shows us, just like it is stated in the Bhagavatam itself, that that no one can, Krishna cannot be explained, but for those of us who live on the material platform, then we can understand Krishna through examples. Therefore, we say Krishna's lotus feet, Krishna's lotus eyes. His eyes are not actually like exactly like a lotus, but a lotus petal is very beautiful. So therefore, the beauty of a lotus petal is compared to Krishna's eyes, or Krishna is like the color of a fresh rain cloud. But actually, the color of Krishna cannot be found within the three three worlds, but that's a comparison. So we can also understand by this very wonderful example, which is an example which is very close to our hearts and even closer to our stomach and our brain. So we'll read this verse. I'm not going to read the word for word, but we'll read the verse and translation and the purport. Devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. So purport. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this analogy as follows. Bhakti or devotion may be compared to tushti, satisfaction, because they both take the form of pleasure. Parishanubhava, experience of the Supreme Lord, and pushti, nourishment, are analogous because both sustain one's life. So this is talking about comparing the bhakti to, in this example, to tushti, which means the pleasure or the satisfaction that you get when you eat. The first thing you're looking for, just like if you're hungry, and so, you're a little bit hungry, you're not starving. You're starving. There's a saying in Spanish that says, for a person who is very hungry, there is no such thing as hard bread. So, anyway, so this first thing you want satisfaction. If you have something very dry or too salty, then you won't eat it. And pushti, nourishment, pare isha anubhava. This parishanubhava is pare isha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, anubhava, direct perception, or anubhava. By direct perception, anubhava literally means direct feeling the Lord directly. Otherwise, getting the nourishment, getting the understanding, getting the spiritual strength. And virakti, detachment, and shuddhapaya, cessation of hunger, may be compared because both free one from further hankering, so that one may experience shanti or peace. A person who is eating not only becomes uninterested in other activities, but increasingly becomes uninterested in the food itself, according to his satisfaction. On the other hand, according to Sri Jiva Goswami, although one who is experiencing the blissful personality of Godhead, Krishna, becomes uninterested in anything other than Krishna, his attachment to Krishna increases at every moment. Therefore, it is to be understood that the transcendental beauty and qualities of the Supreme Lord are not material, since one never becomes satiated by relishing the bliss of the Supreme Lord. So, Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakatah Mahim Dharati Shvaparantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shivashari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So here's the big difference. On the material platform, the two things are similar experience. First, there's pleasure, then there's nourishment or in the case of devotional service, you are nourished by knowledge and nourished by detachment. And then then detachment is like when you eat, you give up hunger. But the big difference is because eating is material, you give up the actual activity itself. Whereas in devotional service, you increase the activity because it's transcendental, it's spiritual. Therefore, we say anandam buddhivardhanam. It's ever expanding. So go on with the purport a little bit. The word virakti is very significant in this verse. Virakti means detachment, whereas tyaga means renunciation. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the word renunciation can be used in a situation in which one considers giving up an enjoyable object. But by considering everything to be the potential paraphernalia in the service of the Lord, as described in the previous verse, one need not give thought to renunciation, for one uses everything in the proper way in the service of the Lord, yukta vairagyam uchate. So this is a very important point, that the difference between detachment and renunciation. Of course, renunciation in devotional service is necessary. Srila Prabhupada explains that the verse given by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, by Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, that renunciation, coming from knowledge, is real renunciation, or in this case, detachment. Meaning that when you understand things properly, and when you increase your attachment to Krishna, that really detachment, as Srila Prabhupada explains many times, that there's no question of detachment, but detachment means reattachment. No, it means that you're attached to all these things in this material world, in this material atmosphere, but you become reattached to Krishna, the original object of attraction. Therefore, Krishna says, Maya saktamana partha. O Arjuna, just become attached to me. Then you will become detached from everything else. And there's another verse which is in this purport. I would say it at this time, but I'll wait since it's in the purport later on. So this is a very important point. And renunciation means you're enjoying something in this world and you give it up. So that's laudable. That's very good. But a devotee becomes attached to Krishna. This is our process. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada said, chant and be happy. Prabhupada said, when you bring people to Krishna consciousness, let them become attached to Krishna, his beauty, his holy name, everything about him. And then detachment will come automatically, as it says here, that bhakti parishanubhava virakti, that the virakti comes automatically. This is anyway, I'll wait a little bit to make that point. So I'll go on with the purport. I wanted to make one point, but I think it's also made a little later in this purport. The very pleasing analogy of a good meal is given in this verse. A hungry man busily consuming a sumptuous plate of food is not interested in anything else happening around him. In fact, he considers any other topic or activity a disturbance to his concentration on the delicious meal. Similarly, as one advances in Krishna consciousness, one considers anything unrelated to devotional service of Krishna an obnoxious disturbance. Such concentrated love of Godhead has been described in the second canto of the Bhagavatam by the words Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yacheta Purusha Param, that when one does devotional service, and here the word tivrena. Tivrena means forceful, strong, potent. So when it's very forceful, strong, and potent, then it becomes very, very, very convincing and very powerful. So going back to this, many times I've given the example of detachment. Just like you may have a pain in your arm or some other part of the body, but if someone brings your favorite dish or something you love very much, then you forget about the pain. So it's not that by becoming Krishna conscious, becoming very attached to Krishna, that one becomes, that one doesn't feel any pain or one doesn't feel what's going on in this material world. But it means that whatever's happening becomes insignificant. Just like that pain becomes insignificant. As long as you have that taste, the pain remains insignificant. So as long as we practice Krishna consciousness, then that taste will increase more and more and more. So just as a hungry materialistic man, upon seeing sumptuous food, immediately desires to put it in his mouth, an advanced devotee of Krishna, upon seeing a material object, immediately becomes eager to use it for the pleasure of Krishna. So this is the symptom of real renunciation or real detachment. That you see something, but because you're Krishna conscious, you see this object, even the most tempting objects in this material world, food, the opposite sex, or whatever, anything that's super, super attractive to us, that very much binds us to this material world. If we see that as Krishna's property, just like Srila Prabhupada wrote one letter to one lady devotee, and because she had questioned Srila Prabhupada about, that sometimes I see that men are attracted to me. What do I do about that? Prabhupada said, so this attraction is a basic principle of material existence. But you should see yourself as one of Krishna's gopis, not that artificially, but meaning that your beauty should be used for Krishna's service. Therefore, if someone is attracted, you can give them a book, or you can tell them about Krishna. One time, Srila Prabhupada said that because we have many women, then we will have many men. So this is one of his moments of, it seems a little funny, but it's true but we have to try to convert these things by seeing them as Krishna's property. As soon as we see things, that's why the peace formula 529 is so important. That Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Or as it says in the Ishupanishad, that Ishavashamidam Sarvam Yatten Jagaten Jagat Tena Chaktena Bunjita. That everything belongs to Krishna. Everything belongs to the Supreme. So without the spontaneous hunger to engage everything in the service of Krishna and to dive deeper and deeper into the ocean of love of Krishna, so-called realization of God, or loose talk about so-called religious life is irrelevant to the actual experience of entering the kingdom of God. So here Srila Prabhupada describes what we should, how we can understand if I'm actually on the platform of advanced devotional service. Spontaneous hunger to engage everything in the service of Krishna and to dive deeper and deeper into the ocean of love of Krishna. So this was explained by Rupa Goswami, that Tatra Laulyam, Tatralalyam means that the whole verse by Rupa Goswami is Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati Kriyatam Yarikuto Pi Labdaye Tatvalalyam Api Mulyam Ekalam Janmakoti Sukritaya Nalabhyate. That Krishna Bhakti Rasa Mati Bhavita Mati, that when one's opinion, when one's consciousness is totally absorbed in Krishna Bhakti Rasa, in wanting to taste the pleasure of serving Krishna, there's only one price you can pay. And what is that price? Tatralolyam. Tatralolyam means that that a greed, an intense greed, very, very intense greed, is the only price. And Janmakoti Sukritaya, unlimited pious activities can never bring about the same result. So this is Krishna consciousness, that we have to have. That's the desire. I want Krishna. I want Krishna. I want Krishna. This is called crying out for Krishna. I diving deeper into the ocean. And I'll explain this at each stage of advancement in devotional service when we finish the purport. And Prabhupada says here, loose talk, so-called realization of God, otherwise people proclaiming loose talk, speaking about God, but their life doesn't reflect that. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the path of Bhakti Yoga is so joyful and practical that even in the stage of sadhana bhakti, in which one follows the rules and regulations without an advanced understanding, one can perceive the ultimate result. As stated by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Iha yasya harer dasya Kamana Manasagira Nikilas Vasivasta Su Jivan Muktaya Su Uchate, which means that Srila Prabhupada doesn't explain it here, but Iha Yasya, when one is within this world, Harer Dasya, but is a devotee of Krishna, a real devotee, not a proclaimed devotee, but a real devotee. Kamana Manasagira, evidenced by offering all of one's actions and thoughts and words into devotional service, Nikilasu api avastasu. Even though they may appear to be engaged in materialistic life, otherwise a family person is working, taking care of their family, showing affection to the children. Krishna showed affection to his children, so it's certainly a natural thing to do. Or even a brahmachari or a sannyasi doing book distribution, preaching, it looks like they're like everybody else, and they're also having to suffer like everybody else. This is a question that was asked to Srila Prabhupada, and also Bhaktivinoda Thakur answered this question, that why is it that a devotee has to suffer like everyone else in this material world? And Prabhupada said, a devotee's suffering is not the same. A devotee's suffering is just to rid him of the remnants of material attachment, where a materialistic person's suffering is separation from his object of enjoyment. So it's a big, big difference. Jivan mukta su uchate, such a person is liberated. But Srila Prabhupada continues, as soon as one surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, prapadyamanasya, giving up all other activities, viraktir anyata cha, one is immediately to be considered a liberated soul, Jivan Mukta. The Supreme Lord, Krishna, is so merciful that when a living entity understands that the personality, Krishna, is the source of everything and surrenders to the Lord, Krishna personally takes charge of him and reveals to him within his heart that he is under the Lord's full protection. So this is what I was referring to the beginning of, I believe it's beginning of teachings of Lord Kapila, that I'll have to look it up. And that just like crying out to one's mother, this is what it means to understand that Krishna is the source of everything and surrender. Surrender doesn't just mean forceful surrender. Just like all of us, we have to go to work, we have to we have to pay taxes, we have to eat, we have to go to the bathroom, we have to do all these things are forced by our body, by our mind, by superior forces. Adhyatmika, Adi Bhaurika, Adi Daivika. These are all forced upon us. But when it's totally voluntary, when I just want to surrender Krishna, when there's no force, then it becomes pure devotion. So, thus devotion, direct experience of the personality of Godhead, detachment from other objects become manifest, even in the beginning stage of Bhakti Yoga. And since Bhakti Yoga begins at the point of liberation, other processes have as their final goal salvation or liberation. But according to the Bhagavad Gita, and then I just quoted this, but we'll say it again. Sarvadhamam parityaja mam ekam sharanam raja aham tvam sarvapapibhyo mokshayishami ma shucha. If one surrenders to Krishna, one is immediately liberated and thus begins his career as a transcendental devotee with complete confidence in the Lord's protection. So here, the key word throughout the purport and the key word in devotional service is surrender. We have to surrender to Krishna. And if we don't surrender to Krishna, then our devotional service will never prosper. We'll never be able to come to the point of really feeling pure Krishna consciousness. Because sometimes we think it's like going to the store and buying something. Otherwise, as soon as you give your money, you get your product. But because the product in this case is Krishna, love for Krishna, prema bhakti, the most wonderful, valuable thing in the three worlds. And because the price, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Nityananda Prabhu, is faith. Krishna has to make sure you pay the right price. Otherwise, your faith is strong. As Lord Chaitanya describes faith, he says that faith means that the sabde vishvasya kahe sudrida nishtoy Krishna bhakti sarva karma krita hoy. That real faith, shraddha sabde, means the unswerving and unflinching conviction that Krishna bhakti hoila sarva karma krita hoy. That through Krishna bhakti, if I actually come to the platform of pure bhakti or real surrender, then everything else will be accomplished. Krishna will take care of everything else. Once we surrender, just like in the case of the Avanti Brahmin. The Avanti Brahmin, he was a Brahmin, but he really lived like a Vaishya. He was always concerned with money, and he was very greedy and very stingy. He wouldn't even give his family members the basic things they needed. So Krishna arranged that he lost everything. People cheated him because they didn't like him. He was so greedy and so cruel. And then his family members rejected him. Just like Krishna says in the Bhagavatam famous verse, which Srila Prabhupada also quotes many times, Yasyaham anugrinami harisye taddanam janai tato to tado dhanam chajat chato chatat yasya swajana dukkha dukhitam. That when Krishna favors someone, when Krishna desires to favor someone, otherwise meaning someone who's too attached to to into their own material, their own life, their possessions, their thoughts, their words, their ego, then Harishe Taddanam Janai, Krishna takes everything away. And not only, and when he does that, what happens? Even his family members reject him. So in the case of the Avanti Brahmin, his family members said, because he said, and he went to his family members and said, I've lost everything. Please, please, help me. And they said, what did you ever do with us? You never even gave us the basic necessities of life. Therefore, it's your problem. And he was miserable. But then all of a sudden, he felt very wonderful because he felt like that I really didn't need any of those things. And now that I don't have any of those things, I don't have any anxiety, no stress. So I actually feel very wonderful. So it was in the beginning, there was some stress, just like in the surrendering process. In the beginning, there may be some stress, there may be some difficulty. But then when one comes to see that I didn't need all these things, even in the Christian Bible, it says, Christ said, better to give than receive. When you give something, when you do some service, when you help someone, even on the ordinary platform, what to speak of devotional service, when one sees that another living entity is pleased and that living entity exhibits love, because when you please someone from your heart, that extracts love from them and you feel that love. And the feeling of love is what we're hankering for, what we're desirous of, what we're looking for in every relationship we have with husband, wife, children, friends, family, community, nation. We want to be loved, we want to be appreciated. And but when that appreciation is felt through the false ego of thinking I am the doer, that then it becomes very, very unpleasant. So this is the main thing that one has to keep in mind, that the love will come from this surrender, and surrender means service, and service means sacrifice. So when these things are there, everything becomes very wonderful. So anyway, I wanted to give some examples. First of all, let's take the example which I just gave of the neophyte devotee. The neophyte devotee, like this Brahmin, Avanti Brahmin, or the neophyte, like Arjuna, takes the position of a neophyte. He takes that position that he doesn't want to do what Krishna wants him to do. Does that sound familiar to anyone? No. Otherwise, we have our plans, but this famous saying goes, man proposes, God disposes. So we may, we know we're devotees of Krishna, we know Krishna is the supreme, but we have the desires in our hearts, and therefore sometimes we give more emphasis to those desires than to serving and pleasing Krishna. So the neophyte devotee is forced. Krishna forces them. Krishna puts them into very difficult situations. And then they are obliged to surrender to Krishna. Of course, sometimes people are very foolish and they don't surrender to Krishna. They blame Krishna, or they question Krishna. Why did you do this to me? Why is this happening to me? Otherwise, they're saying, I'm such a great devotee. I love you so much. I serve you. I've done so many services. Where's my payback? Where's my remuneration? So this is the neophyte has to be forced. The Madhyamadikari, the Madhyamadikari is mentioned here, that in this purport that we just read. Iha yasya harer dasya, iha yasya harer dasya, karmana manasagita. Through the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives this as an example of those who are situated in sadhana bhakti. They're not forced. They've realized, I must serve Krishna. Therefore, being in this world and serving Krishna by using everything in Krishna's service, yuktam vairagyam, then they are in a very special situation. And because they're in that very special situation of giving, systematically working for Krishna, then they're also, they become joyful. One time Srila Prabhupada said that even if Krishna, we all believe that Krishna exists, but even if Krishna didn't exist, what would be the problem? What would be because a devotee is happier than a non-devotee. If a devotee is actually serving Krishna nicely, they feel satisfied because they have faith in something sublime. Instead of having faith in something very flickering, very temporary, they have faith in something extraordinary. So even if that extraordinary thing didn't exist, a devotee and generally will be happier than a materialistic person and have more peace. So let us consider some great devotees. We considered neophyte devotee Kanishthadikari. They're forced. A Madhyamadikari is disciplined out of duty. First is fear, fear of death, fear of hell, fear of suffering, then sense of duty, Madhyamadikari, and then love for Krishna. I'll give some examples of some Mahabhagavats and some people who became Mahabhagavats immediately by that process. So first of all, the famous example of Draupadi. Draupadi, first, she was thinking of herself. She was thinking that my honor, my respect, they're trying to take my clothes away, my honor, my respect, my reputation. But then she realized that here's these huge, strong Kshatriyas with arms as big as our bodies. What's she going to do? What are we going to do? We have something even stronger than these big Kshatriyas, which is Daivihesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. We have Maya, very powerful. She's so powerful. As Srila Prabhupada said, she's got 10 arms, and her main weapon is the trident, which is the three miseries of material existence. But if you get past that, somehow or another, she has 9 other arms. So very difficult. Mami Vaye Prapadyante. But if we surrender to Krishna, if we cry out to Krishna, then it becomes very easy. It becomes easy, meaning that once you actually surrender, once you prove to Krishna, otherwise it's not just immediately, as I said, it's not like the cash register that I give my money, they give me the product. Because giving the money, showing that you have faith, Krishna knows how much faith you have. He knows exactly what percentage, but he wants you to see, because generally we have a tendency to overestimate our faith, overestimate our devotion, overestimate everything about ourselves. And therefore we think, oh, I'm a initiated devotee, I'm a Brahmin, I'm a qualified personality. No humility, not enough humility, not enough tolerance, not enough respect. So Krishna wants to see that. He wants to see that you're crying out, not that you're showing off, but you're crying out to him. And therefore, when she put her hands up, said, Krishna, Krishna, then Krishna came, and no one could defeat her. Even these strong Kshatriyas, they couldn't do anything. Then there's the case of Pitu Maharaj. Pitu Maharaj was being glorified by everyone. He was very powerful. He was the Shaktivesh avatar of management. He but then everyone began to glorify him. And Prithu Maharaj said, no, don't glorify him. Let me do something first. Let me earn that, no. And instead of accepting the glorification, he began to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He began to praise Krishna and offer everything to Krishna. And then the four Kumaras came, and he said, please, I don't have anything to offer you, but please take my kingdom. Otherwise, he thought, these four Kumaras, what can I give them? And he thought I could give them my kingdom. But immediately they said, no, you keep the kingdom. He offered them the kingdom, but he knew, what are they going, why would they want a kingdom? They have Krishna, they have Vishnu. Why should they want a kingdom? And just like Arjuna says in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, that he says that that what good will it do to win a kingdom with sovereignty of the demigods? That won't dry up my tears. That won't stop this lamentation. Otherwise, he's realizing that I have to surrender to you. And then what does he say? He says that Shishashiham Sharimam Tvam Papanam. I am your disciple. I'm surrendered unto you. Please accept me. So that was Arjuna's realization. And then what happened to Arjuna? He cried out for Krishna by killing thousands of people. That was his crying out. Our crying out is different for different people. How you express your surrender to Krishna is very different for different devotees, but it has to come from the heart and it has to be 100%. Of course, in the beginning, it may not be 100%, and therefore Krishna will arrange that there are instances in your life that bring you to 100%. So that was another example, Prithu Maharaj. And then there's, another instance, Prithu Maharaj, as Srila Prabhupada points out, he became happy in Krishna consciousness by the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam. And Srila Prabhupada says that those two things will keep us, and they're like polishing the heart, cleansing the heart. Chetodarbanamarjanam Baba Mahadvagniravapanam. First you polish it, then all of the dirty things go away. And then one can be happy and peaceful. Just like it says in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bhakti Nishkam Attaeva Shanta Mukti Mukti Siddhikam Kavaliya Shanta. That for a devotee of Krishna, they're always peaceful. But Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kama, but for the sense enjoyers, or the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, for all of them, calm, because they have some kind of desire. In the beginning, the enjoyers, it's more gross, and the yogi, it's more refined, but Shakaliya Shanta, they will never be happy in Krishna, because they don't have Krishna. How can they be happy? So then, of course, also in Bhagavad Gita, this is stated, and Srila Prabhupada stated this in relation to Prithu Maharaj, that Yani Shasarva Bhutanam Tasyam Jagati Samyami Yasyaham Jagrati Bhutani Sanisha Pashato Mune. That what is nighttime for everyone is daytime for the self-realized sage. Otherwise, this detachment is natural for a devotee, but it's very, very, it's nighttime. It's very miserable for a attached person. And what is the attachment for a devotee? Krishna, Krishna Bhakti, serving all the time without any self-interest, that doesn't sound very appealing to a materialistic person. So these are all different ways we can understand that what it is, the depth, and we see in all these examples, these devotees, these pure devotees, or these devotees who become pure devotees, they there's always sacrifice involved, because even if they themselves are pure, then it doesn't matter, they're pure, but their audience, those who hear this Bhagavatam, we who read this Bhagavatam, we who hear this Bhagavatam, we are becoming, we're coming to the platform of pure devotional service. And therefore we do have to make some sacrifices, although they're not very big sacrifices. Just like I was thinking today, how many people around the world don't even know where their next meal will come from? And Srila Prabhupada said, even in World War II, none of the devotees went hungry. And Prabhupada said, even throughout my life, even after I took sannyas, I was never hungry. There was always, Krishna always supplied, even though I had nothing, Krishna always supplied. So if we have that faith, if we have that understanding, then then it we come to the platform of loving Krishna. So then another example I thought of was Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj, he spoke to Shukadeva Goswami, more or less what he said. He said, what is the use of all these hells? And we know the famous example, which Srila Prabhupada expands in the Upadeshamrita, of the elephants bathing, Kunjara Marjanam. So Kunjara Marjanam means that the elephant takes the dirt, bathes in the river, takes the dirt and throws it back on himself. So Parikshit Maharaj said, this is the atonement that people do in this world. Otherwise, trying to do the minimum for Krishna, or doing the minimum sacrifice and everything and expecting the maximum result, this is like modern religion in most cases. And so it won't it won't give the proper result. The example in the Bhagavatam, which was given by Lord Brahma, is Shreya Shatim Bhaktim Udasyate Bhavo, that when one has this wonderful thing, which is devotional service, but udasya, one gives it up very foolishly. Tishanti ye kevala bodha labdaye. And what does one gain? So many difficulties by going through all of these sacrifices and austerities and penances. That's the only gain you get. Teshamasa kleshaha eva shishyate. That's all you get from it. Nanyat yata shtula tushavaghatinam, which is just like beating the husk of the rice. The rice is already gone. Otherwise, if you beat the husk, what is the benefit? Just the only benefit is maybe some exercise for the arms, beating some good exercise. But you won't get you won't get self-realization. You only get trouble, the trouble of going through all that activity. Or, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Klesho dikadastesham avyaktavechatasam avyakta higatir dukam dehavidbhiravapyate. That if one is embodied, then going through all these arduous sacrifices, austerities, and penances without having the actual goal as Krishna is simply a lot of difficulty. So this is confirmed both in the Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad Gita. So then another example I thought of was Chitraketu. He was very attached. And how did he become detached? A little more refined process. He heard. He had to go through some suffering. Sometimes we have to go through some difficulty to bring us to that point. We should understand that difficulty is sent by Krishna. tatenukampam sumikshamana. That we're very happy to accept that sukshamikshama, because we know that that all of these, everything that's happening to me is anukampa. Anukampa means mercy coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we get this wonderful experience of devotional service, then we become enlivened and the attachment becomes overcome. So Chitraketu, he was attached, but he became detached by hearing from Narada Muni, and of course the Angira Muni was the witness, so to speak, and Chitraketu, when actually the child, his son, woke up from his death and began to speak philosophically, he became so detached. He understood. But sometimes Krishna takes something away. Sometimes Krishna gives us something. Generally, he gives us something, sees how we use it. If we don't use it properly, he takes it away, just like a child or anyone. You give them something, you give someone a homework assignment, and they don't do it, so you take away their grade. You give a child a toy, if they abuse it, you take it away, or if they cause some destruction. My mother said I was very good at that when I was young. I don't remember, but I heard that. So I hope I learned my lesson. Then there's Prahlad Maharaj, one of the greatest examples. Srila Prabhupada uses, excuse me, 3 examples throughout his lectures and teachings and purports. Prahlad Maharaj, number 1, Haridas Thakur, number 2, and Jesus Christ, number 3, of this sacrifice like Prahlad. Prahlad, he didn't want to play. Prabhupada said that it's almost impossible for a child not to play, almost impossible. But Prahlad Maharaj, also Parikshit Maharaj, but Prahlad Maharaj is really glorified for this. Instead of playing, he preached to his friends. Why should we waste this time? Let us engage in Krishna Kirtan and hearing about Krishna. So, and when he was questioned about this, where did you learn this from? He said, I learned it from my spiritual master. So the importance of the spiritual master, the importance of devotee association to help us come to the point of surrender. And then there's Ambarish Maharaj. Ambarish Maharaj, he gave up everything. He had everything. Some people give up everything by force. Otherwise, everything's taken away. But for a pure devotee, Ambarish Maharaj was such a great example. He had everything. He was the emperor of the world. Not only was the emperor of the world, he was so attached to serving Krishna that he wouldn't even perform yagyas, meaning the ceremonial yagyas. He had his ministers do that, and everything offered to Vishnu, so that he could stay in his chambers and perform pure devotional service. He was so advanced. The sages who heard from Bhrigu Muni after he went and saw first Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and then Lord Vishnu, and declared to them that Lord Vishnu is supreme. And when they heard his story and the examples that he gave, they became totally surrendered. And they understood that Krishna is the supreme. We must surrender to him. So these are some examples. And I wanted to give a couple of examples also, excuse me, of the residents of Goloka Vrindavan, the cowherd boys. They were running into the mouth of Aghasura. And they even realized this is dangerous. Of course, a devotee should not be foolishly run into danger. This is happening in the spiritual world. This is under the under the protection of Yoga Maya. One of the boys said, looks like a big cave. And then one of them said, what's that fishy smell? And another one said, it's probably just a big demon. And I said, well, let's go in and see. And in any case, if we need some help, we'll just call on Krishna. And one may think, well, wait a minute, that seems to be a little offensive. But they're so attached to Krishna, they don't think of him as the supreme Lord, as the object of their worship. They just think of him as the most wonderful person in our lives, the person without whom we cannot live. And so they ran into the mouth of Aghasura. And then they cried out for Krishna. Krishna came and saved them by killing the demon. Then they were caught in the midst of the forest fire, and they were, and definitely that time they called out for Krishna, 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 Krishna. As Srila Prabhupada said, they didn't call for the fire brigade. Prabhupada gives the example of a parrot. You can teach a parrot to say, help, help, help. But if a cat comes, the parrot will go, ah, ah, ah. No, it won't go help, help, help. It won't go Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. You could teach him to say Krishna. But when the cat comes, the parrot will go, ah. So in the same way, that the cowherd boys didn't call out the fire brigade or some, let's get some water. They said, Krishna, Krishna. This is full surrender. This is crying out to Krishna in the full sense of the word. And then, of course, there's the gopis of Vrindavan. They were crying out to Krishna at every moment in total separation. When they were separated from Krishna, they said a very beautiful prayer. Na pare ham nirabadya samyutam sasarukityam vibudha putasiva ya ma bhajam durjara geya shrinkalam. That napare ham means there's no equal. Nirabadya samyutam, from these totally surrendered gopis who have not even the smallest drop of personal consideration. Swasadu krityam. I could never, this could never be achieved, even by myself. Vibudha yusapiva. Even if I had a lifetime as long as the demigods or as long as Lord Brahma, doing sacrifices, I could never acquire the pious activities. I could never compensate for the gopi surrender. Why? Yama bachan durjarageha srinkalam. Because they have given up their homes, they have given up their families, they have given up their reputations, they have given up their social positions, just to be with me. This is spoken by Krishna. So it says, he said, the only thing, I cannot repay them. I cannot repay them. The only thing I can do is tell them that your repayment is your own good fortune, is your own wonderful, unfathomable, unparalleled qualities of devotion. That's the only, you yourselves are your payment. You are paying me by seeing your degree of surrender. And the other gopis who were forced to be surrendered from Krishna, their hearts were burning in separation. And they meditated so profusely on Krishna that all desires for anything else in their hearts. Otherwise, these were gopis who were not yet fully on the platform. Otherwise, they were not eternal gopis. They were becoming purified. And they gave up it gave up all of their desires, everything. They became pure Nitya Siddha gopis of Goloka Vrindavan. They immediately went to Goloka Vrindavan. They didn't even stay around for the rest of Krishna's pastimes. So these are examples of crying out for Krishna. Crying out for Krishna is something very special, very beautiful, very wonderful, and it's something that we need to do. And if we don't do it, otherwise, if we don't, we're attached to so many things, then what is our process? Follow 4 regulated principles, chant minimum 16 rounds, chant more, hear more, glorify Krishna more, do more service. And to the degree we do that, we will advance. And if we don't do it, but we're still trying to some degree, Krishna will push us. Krishna will take away the obstacles. So that, and sometimes that may hurt because we're very attached. But Krishna will make sure that we get something greater if we have faith in him. He takes away, he doesn't give immediately. He takes away to see, is this person really surrendered to me? Or by taking away this thing that they love so much, just like the Avanti Brahmin. First, he was in anxiety. No, I've lost everything. But then he realized, but I've gained everything. So this was his example. And of course, even if we're very neophyte devotees, Krishna will help us. Krishna will give us association. Krishna will give us devotional life. Krishna will give us the teachings. Krishna has given us Srila Prabhupada. Krishna has given us the Bhagavatam through Srila Prabhupada. So we're so fortunate. And so anyway, these are some thoughts on crying out for Krishna and some thoughts on this particular verse of the Bhagavatam. I will stop here and see if there's any questions. You can either raise your little blue hands if you have a question, or you can write something in the chat, or if someone's on Facebook, that can be transferred here to the chat. So any questions? And thank you very much for your kind attention. Any comments, questions, reflections, interesting points? Otherwise, we can just chant Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, good day, can you hear me?
Who's that? I'm hearing somebody. It's a little cutting up a little bit.
Hare Krishna, good day, can you hear me now?
Ah, yes, now. Yes. Okay.
Oh, boy.
If you're having a problem with your microphone, just write it. Anyone else in the meantime?
One, two, three.
I hear Bhagavan Narada. Are you unmuted?
Okay, there we go. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
My obeisances. I felt like saying something. I didn't want to let any time go to waste, but I wanted to speak a little bit about like difficulty. You mentioned Krishna sometimes will give us some difficulty, I guess, to wake us up. And I'm speaking personally here, but one of the things I feel that we fail to do as a society is acknowledge like health. You know, like I've been dealing with some really serious health issues, probably because of eating habits. And I'm not even really a bad eater, I guess. I don't really have that bad of habits, but I think like as a society, we could promote more nutritious eating and the benefits of like being regulated in our eating. I know that sometimes is mentioned, but I wanted to get your viewpoint on how we as an international society can kind of promote these things, like just diet, you know, especially younger. I feel like living in the ashram for those years is actually what kind of just really threw me off balance, and I haven't been able to kind of get that back when I was younger. So I wanted to kind of, I know that you're very strict on what you put in your body, but it just seems, you know, especially when we're immature, we kind of think, oh, we're not these bodies. Let me just stuff them with pizza at any time of the day and do what I want. But it really affects us in our service potentially in the long run. So what can we do as a society to kind of be more tied into health issues?
Well, you can ask anybody in this audience here how many times in Trinidad's famous for people being addicted to very, very tasty things. We have Radha Ballava Prabhu, who is like, enchanting everyone in Trinidad, which is with his wonderful cooking, and Rajarshi Prabhu, who makes the best doubles in Trinidad, I've heard. And but these are great tasting things. But yes, it's a very good point, because Prabhupada emphasized making very wonderful prasadam to attract people to Krishna consciousness. He called gulab jamans our bullets, something that we would shoot at someone, people, otherwise to capture them. But then Prabhupada said so many times, one devotee was saying, after saying, chant Hare Krishna and hear about Krishna, Prabhupada's next instruction was take care of yourself. Why? Because with the main thing we should understand, this body belongs to Krishna. So in the beginning, yeah, when I'm a young person or a new person, let me just eat sumptuously and become attached to prasadam. But once I become attached, it's good. I have something that's very tasty, but I should only take as much as necessary. As Prabhupada said, if you work like an elephant, you eat like an elephant. If you work like a bird, you should eat like a bird. So, so the important thing is not even what it is, but how much you take. Prabhupada would eat very, very delicious and sometimes very heavy things, fried and in ghee, but he wouldn't take a huge amount of those things. And of course, he did have diabetes, but being a total pure devotee, he had diabetes for like the whole time we knew him. But you never saw the effects of it because he was transcendental. But we're not so transcendental. And so we need to, yes, a good diet is important. Srila Prabhupada said one time that 6 days, rice, dal, chapatis, otherwise simple diet. And one day you can feast. So sometimes we have 6 days feast and one day, because I'm a little sick, I'm austere. So yes, we should be careful. And everybody loves good prasadam, but we should be very moderate, because Krishna recommends. This is a symptom, not only eating, and of course, Rupa Goswami, atyahara prayashas cha. So these instructions are there from Rupa Goswami, from the Bhagavatam. We see people fasting and being very disciplined. So what can we do as a society? Well, when we read these particular verses that speak about the austerities of devotees, we can bring out this point. And we can also emphasize how Srila Prabhupada would say to so many devotees about taking care of their health. And Prabhupada took care of his health. Even though he would eat very sumptuous things, Prabhupada would also take remedial measures. In India, it's very popular that people eat very delicious foods. But when they do that, they always take something to compensate. They take some strong ginger tincture or something else that is very digestive. But the best thing is a simple diet, and then every once in a while you have something very nice, or in every meal you have a small quantity of something very nice, and then everything else is nutritious, more concentrating on nutrition. So yes, as a society, you as a leader of a center, and anyone else who's leading a center or a congregational group or leading a family, accept that responsibility, as Srila Prabhupada did, to teach us how we should be, we should be disciplined in our habits, eating, sleeping, all habits. And we also we can all offer a little prayer for Bhagavan Narada because he's had some very severe health issues in the last, I don't know, few days or few weeks. So he's a very dear devotee and he's preaching. So let us all pray that Krishna helps him recover very quickly. So we have some questions here. This one, Satsarup Maharaj said that when devastation comes, chanting, crying will be especially difficult. So do we have to hit rock bottom every time to cry out? It depends on how deep the devastation is, but it's better, just like Srila Prabhupada said, that it's better to, just like Prabhupada gave the example one time, when you're cooking, it's better to clean the kitchen so that at the end, you don't have so much misery. Otherwise, if you use all the pots and, Prabhupada was very expert. He could cook a 12, 13 course meal in 45 minutes, and he would have every pot washed by the time he finished, or at least, everything that didn't have a preparation in it. He would immediately make sure the kitchen was immaculate. And of course, in the beginning, Prabhupada did it himself, and the devotees started helping him. So, no, we don't have to hit rock bottom, because that's why in Upadeshamrita, Srila Prabhupada in his purport gives the example of the first class is you hear and you respond. Otherwise, we hear, we use our intelligence. So if you're on the platform of intelligence, you will respond and you will, you hear, you understand, and you do it. That's the best thing. You don't wait for devastation. Otherwise, when there's symptoms of devastation, just like now there's so much concern about climate change, and more serious people are demanding that we take we take measures. But most people will just wait until the whole world is a desert, just like in the U.S. It's having a huge heat wave caused by climate change, and huge millions and millions of forests. 10 times the size of Trinidad, half the size of Texas. We have somebody from Texas. So, one fraction of the size of Canada, and maybe 3/4 the size or the whole size of Florida is burnt up. And why? Because people are abusive. So if we listen, that's good. If we're on the mental platform, we have to hear and we have to experience, and then maybe we'll give it up. But if we're fools, we'll hear, we'll experience, and we still won't give it up. So better to be on the first class platform of hearing. And therefore, the more we hear, the more we have the tendency of not reaching the point of devastation. So here's another question. Anyway, this is a comment, so I go to the next one. Is there a similarity between this verse quoted in Srimad Bhagavatam? This verse quoted, you mean the verse I guess you mean the verse we just spoke, and Srimad Bhagavatam 127, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. By rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, one immediately acquires, yes, it's very similar, only this verse expands on that verse. Just like the whole Bhagavatam, it unpacks. You get the first unpacking is the Chaturshloki verses. And this, after the Chaturshloki verses, they're unpacked into different verses that further become unpacked, they expand and expand and expand. So this verse is really, and other verses also are an expansion of that preliminary verse, you know, of answering the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya, that one acquires knowledge. Of course, that verse doesn't really say immediate. It's not always immediate, but it will happen. It depends on one's devotion. Any other question? Oh, here's some more. Here's another one. I mentioned that when we bring others to Krishna consciousness, we first expose them to Krishna in a way where they become attracted to Krishna and his beauty, etc., and attachment to other things will fall away. However, we also learn much about detachment and renunciation in the beginning. How do we reconcile getting attached to Krishna first with the guidelines about the importance of detachment without artificially renouncing while still detaching appropriately? Yes, therefore Prabhupada said many times it's a gradual process. Otherwise, don't think, I just read something recently, trying to remember now, where Srila Prabhupada said that if you try to renounce, and of course, this verse in itself is a tribute to that. First, you need to get the taste. First, you need to chant and dance and feel the happiness of Krishna consciousness. And then you get knowledge, you get some understanding, your intelligence becomes nourished, and you become more serious about understanding the purpose of life. And then renunciation is a product. So false renunciation comes from the false ego. You want others to see you be detached, but the result of that is that you become more attached. You become attached to your detachment. Just like sometimes I give an example, you become proud of your humility, and therefore everything is ruined. So if you become attached to your detachment, therefore, this is also, as I've mentioned a few times, in the case of Sudam Brahman, because he was a little bit attached to renunciation. This is a realization given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Because he was a little bit attached to his renunciation, Krishna gave him a palace. But he still remained detached because he was a pure devotee and because he had just seen Krishna. So we shouldn't be proud of anything. The only thing we should be proud of is Krishna, that Krishna is such a wonderful person. I'm proud within my heart that he has accepted me. I'm very proud and happy and grateful that he has accepted me. And we're proud of Krishna. We therefore, something you're proud of, you want to exhibit. So either out of pride, false pride, you will exhibit your ego, or out of real pride, you will exhibit Krishna. You will glorify Krishna. Any other question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we accept my obeisances.
Aye, cool.
So my question is this, Prabhupada says, really and truly don't give up anything, because we still have our work to do and everything like you mentioned, but engage it in the service of Krishna. And he also said that the technology of Krishna consciousness is to do everything for Krishna. So can you say a little bit more about that? I know you discussed it earlier on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually Prabhupada said, the only thing you can give up is the idea that I have anything. Because we never have had anything. The only thing we have is Krishna. and that cannot be taken away. But the remembrance of Krishna, or the understanding that we are Krishna's devotee, can be taken away. Otherwise, nothing can be taken away from us. There's actually nothing, because everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore real renunciation means using it for Krishna. But as Rupa Goswami says in that famous verse, Yuktam Vairagyam Uchate, he says, Yatarham upayunjata. Yatarham means with discretion. You have to have the proper discretion, the proper discrimination, the proper understanding that here is, that this belongs to Krishna, and I have to, just like if someone loans you something, then if you're a responsible person, you will be more careful with that thing than you would of your own possession, because it belongs to my dear friend. And because Krishna declares himself, Suriram Sarvabhutanam, the best friend of every living entity, whatever he gives us, this body, my home, my family, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I must take care of it very carefully and make sure that it is engaged 24 hours in the service of Krishna. And when we do it that way, then when we have that mentality, we can acquire so many things for Krishna, just like Srila Prabhupada. He was a renunciant, but he was acquiring. He had millions of dollars at his disposal to acquire. But you would look at Prabhupada's clothes. You can even go, when you go to Vrindavan, if you go into Prabhupada's rooms, there's some of his old sets of clothes, and each one of them has holes in it. Those holes were there in 1977. It's not that some moth got in there and ate the cloth. Prabhupada would, many times, the devotees would give him new cloth and he would take it, but Prabhupada would just use the same cloth. Prabhupada would use the same piece of paper and write all over it with little lines and going sideways, because everything he saw as Krishna's property. So when you see everything as Krishna's property, you can acquire so many things, but at the same time, you will be totally detached from them. You will see them as only belonging to Krishna. And the more I have, the greater responsibility I have to use that in Krishna's service. Is that okay?
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Any other question? Since we don't have any other questions, I thank you all for your kind attention. Oh, wait, there's one. Looks like something may have popped in here at the last moment.
Invitation for everybody.
Oh, okay. That's anyway, that's for everybody, not for me.
No, but we want to invite all the devotees to do
Anyway.
puja next
Thank you
November
all.
8th.
Thank you all very much for your kind attention and for your service and for staying in your Krishna consciousness and increasing your Krishna consciousness. And I pray that the Lord bless you with unswerving devotion and increasing attachment to his lotus feet every day. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Jai Guru Swami ki jai.
Jai.
Ki jai.
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna Gurudev. Thank you very much.
Hare
Thank you so much, Gurudev.
Hari Bol.